Before we begin, welcome back to House of Cleopatra. If ancient destiny, hidden history, and the echoes of forgotten lives move your heart, subscribe now. A new story rises every week, and today, we follow the children of a queen who fought the world to protect them. History remembers Cleopatra for her brilliance, her beauty, her alliances, and her tragic death. But history often forgets that she was also a mother who loved, feared, hoped, and fought not only for her throne, but for the future of her children. And their story is one of the most haunting and powerful chapters of the ancient world. Cleopatra had 4 children, 4 small souls caught in the violent tides of empire, 4 destinies shaped by love, war, betrayal, and exile. First, Caesarion, her eldest son, born of Julius Caesar. Then the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, born of Mark Antony. And finally, the youngest Ptolemy Philadelphus. Each child carried royal blood. Each child carried danger. And each child carried a piece of the world Cleopatra dreamed of building. When Alexandria fell and Octavian's legions marched into the palace, Cleopatra did not fear for herself. She feared for them. The smoke of burning ships darkened the sky. The walls trembled with the footsteps of Roman soldiers. The empire she fought for was collapsing. But in those final hours, she moved like a mother, not a queen, sending messages, hiding scrolls, gathering her children in secret chambers, whispering promises she was no longer sure she could keep. Caesarion, nearly 17, was no longer a boy. Cleopatra had raised him to be a king educated in philosophy, mathematics, diplomacy. She believed he could one day rule beside her. Yet Caesarion carried a curse that no education could shield him from. He was Julius Caesar's true son, and that made him a threat to Octavian, who claimed to be Caesar's heir. Cleopatra knew this truth better than anyone. Rome would never allow 2 Caesars to live. In her heart, she understood what Octavian's arrival meant. Not just the end of Egypt, but the end of Caesarion himself. And so, with desperation, she sent him eastward, toward safety, toward Nubia, toward a dream that maybe, just maybe, he could escape the hammer of Rome. But fate does not bargain when empires are at stake. Octavian captured him, and with a coldness that defined his rise to power, he ordered the boy executed. 1 Caesar is enough, he said. With those words, the bloodline of Julius Caesar ended, and the boy Cleopatra loved more deeply than her own crown was silenced forever. But the story does not end in death. The twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, along with their younger brother Ptolemy Philadelphus, were taken alive. Octavian had a different plan for them. He wanted to parade them through Rome, symbols of Egypt's defeat, trophies of his victory over Antony and Cleopatra. Imagine it! 3 royal children, dressed in chains of gold, walking behind Octavian's chariot as the crowds cheered the fall of their world. They were too young to understand the cruelty, too innocent to grasp the humiliation. But Rome understood, and Octavian understood. This was not just a parade. This was a warning. No foreign bloodline, no Eastern dynasty, no child of Cleopatra would rise again. Yet even in Rome, destiny had its own plans. The twins were placed under the guardianship of Octavia, Antony's Roman wife, a woman known for her kindness, dignity, and quiet strengths. She raised them gently, far from politics, far from propaganda, far from the hatred their parents endured. Alexander Helios, named after the sun, disappears from history. His fate is a blank page, perhaps death from illness, perhaps quiet exile, perhaps erased intentionally from the records of Rome. His silence is one of history's deepest mysteries. But Cleopatra Selene, the daughter, refused to disappear. She inherited her mother's mind, her father's fire, and the sorrow of a lost kingdom. And in Rome, she grew into a young woman who held her head high, who studied, who observed, who remembered everything her mother taught her. Rome expected her to be broken, but Cleopatra Selene was her mother's daughter, and the world would soon learn it. Octavian married her to King Jubatu of Mauritania, a scholar king, a historian, a man of intellect and culture. Together, they ruled North Africa with wisdom, diplomacy, and vision. And in the golden city of Caesarea, Cleopatra Selene began to build something extraordinary, a kingdom that blended Egyptian, Greek, and African traditions. A kingdom that reflected her mother's legacy. She decorated temples with Egyptian symbols. She minted coins with the crescent moon, a subtle rebellion against Rome. She named her son Ptolemy, keeping alive the dynasty Rome tried to erase. And she ruled with intelligence and pride, proving that Cleopatra's blood still carried power. In her hands, the legacy of her parents transformed into something new. She could not restore Egypt, but she could preserve its spirit. She could not save her brothers, but she could protect the future. She could not revive her mother's throne, but she could become a queen in her own right. And she did. Cleopatra Selene became one of the most influential African queens of her time. Her kingdom prospered. Her people thrived. She built monuments, libraries, and palaces. She took the tragedy of her childhood and forged it into strengths. She kept alive the memory of Egypt not through war, but through culture, diplomacy, architecture, and legacy. So while the world says the dynasty ended with Cleopatra's death, that is not entirely true. Through her daughter, the bloodline lived on, woven quietly into African royalty, Roman aristocracy, and Mediterranean culture. And as for Ptolemy Philadelphus, the youngest child, his story fades from history, another mystery swallowed by Rome's silence. Perhaps he died young. Perhaps he lived quietly. Perhaps he was erased. But Egyptian belief teaches that no name is truly lost if someone remembers it, and today, we remember him here. In the end, Cleopatra's children represent more than tragedy. They represent survival, resilience, and legacy. Empires rise and fall. Dynasties burn and crumble. But blood carries stories, and stories carry eternity. Through Caesarion, we remember the cost of being born a king. Through Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus, we feel the silence of forgotten princes. And through Cleopatra Selene, we witness the rebirth of a queen, a daughter who transformed exile into empire. Here, in House of Cleopatra, their names live again. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now. Next week, another legend rises deeper, darker, and even more powerful.